Hey, yo, you ready? Let's do it. Yeah.
This is JWoww from SRMMA.com here on the Verbal Scrap Podcast. Got a special guest in studio, Jaime Jara. How you doing today, my friend?
I'm good. How you guys doing?
Fantastic. Pleasure to finally have you on the show. This is one of our 50th show clips, so epic to have you here, especially after the GC win. Recently becoming super fight champ. I mean, what was it like to once again compete in the GC cage?
I always enjoy fighting for a gladiator challenge, especially because they have like fights close to home, and I always get to fight in front of all my fans. So it's always a pleasure to fight for them.
That's something I was going to ask you about throughout your career, obviously getting your start in Gladiator Challenge. What's it like to, keep coming full circle with those guys? You've been with them since you were younger and throughout your entire career.
It's just, mainly I enjoy just fighting, in my own backyard. And because all my fans are here, so, it's always nice to do that. And that's, big part of the reason why I always fight for GC is because I get to fight in my backyard.
Well, I wanted to get it out of the way pretty quick. You're going to be at Carnage MMA doing your classes for a long time. A lot of fans are interested in how to get in touch with you, how to get more jits training from you. So what times are your classes? What's a good way for people that are interested to maybe join up with you guys and get some of your knowledge?
They can come to my Facebook page. It's under my name, Jaime Jara, or they can go to our website. It's teamcarnagemma.com. They can look up the address there. And the phone numbers if they need to call. But we teach boxing, wrestling, jiu-jitsu. We teach it all. So if there's something for everybody there.
Well, I wanted to ask you about the GC win, your last victory. It looked like you were able to pull out some slick jints once again. I mean, what do you think about how quickly you were able to do your thing? Coming back, you've been able to pull out a couple wins at GC. I mean, what's it like moving forward from what you just did inside the cage?
It's been a few years before I've lost a fight in GC, so it's always nice to fight for GC. I've got a good winning streak going there. That was a good warm-up fight. I'd like to, coming back from Russia off that loss, I felt like I got robbed by the ref, so I was kind of like down on that. And then I come back and win that fight in GC. It kind of erased all that for me. So now I'm ready to just get back into training and go to the next one.
I wanted to ask you about culture shock, being in Russia or anything like that. Were you there long enough to experience anything that stood out to where you really knew, besides obviously weather or being freezing cold maybe, what was something while you were there that kind of let you know, I'm definitely not at home?
The people, nobody spoke English there. It was hard to communicate with anybody. Our money was no good there. We try to buy stuff, they wouldn't even accept our money. We tried to exchange it. It was really hard. It was rough with nobody speaking English. We had no money to buy anything, so we were kind of like, we were at the mercy of the people we're staying with. So,
I wanted to ask you about your beginnings, your pro debut back in 2002, Gladiator Challenge. You got a quick sub, but what were you thinking, being so young in the sport, getting into it where you were? I mean, what were your thought processes after you got a win like that and being set as a pro?
It was crazy. Back in the day, it was a lot different, People train harder. They're a lot more skilled now. Back then, they would pull people out of the crowd, the drunk guys, to come in and fight in the cage, It was a lot different back then. The mindset, the training, everything, it was totally different.
Well, I wanted to ask you something about 2007. It's kind of a time thing for me. Back then, I watched a UFC 73 here in Sacramento. It was stacked. It had Anderson Silva on it. Tito Rashad was on there. And I noticed at that time in your career, you had just gone on a big fat winning streak. You were winning quite a bit, had done a lot in GC. Back then, what were your thoughts on the UFC and where it was and kind of where you were? Was that something that you were hoping to get into, or how did you see them from where you were at?
I always looked to get on any show that would pay me money, and whether that was a the Gladiator Challenge or UFC or Strikeforce or whatever, I was just looking to make some money so I could pay my bills. That's, that was the thing to me.
Well, I wanted to ask you your thoughts on some of the guys that you've competed with and against. Who would you say would be one of the hardest hitters you've been inside the cage with?
I'd have to say Scott Smith. He hit pretty hard. Hands of steel, there you go. He hit hard.
Well, that actually brings me to a thought I was thinking, you fought him a couple times. Those are some epic battles. A couple guys like Anthony Ruiz, you've been able to kind of have his number. What do you feel about how styles make fights? I mean, do you feel like when you do get a victory over someone, does it make it easier if you fight him again? When you lose to someone, does it make it harder to fight him again? What's the thought process behind that?
You know, it's. I think on any given night, anybody can beat anybody. It just depends on, you know, where your head's at. I think that has a lot to do with how it affects the outcome of the fight. You know, if you get in somebody's head and you're in their head, you know, you got half the fight won already. You know, I believe that styles do, you know, they do matter. You know, if you get a good wrestler that can take a good striker down and nullify his striking, you know, that style is a bad matchup for that striker. You know, wrestlers are pretty much bad matchups for, you know, jiu-jitsu guys and strikers. You know, you got to find somebody that's really well rounded to be able to you know, make a good fight. You know.
I wanted to ask you about the UFC because obviously they have a statute of making fights happen that fans want to make happen. So they've been putting it out as often as possible. I wanted to know your thoughts about the expansion of MMA. You can go watch MMA now on Wednesday nights, Saturday nights. I mean, do you think that there will ever become a saturation of the sport, like fans won't like it, or are you just overall really happy with the growth?
I think that there's shows out there, they put shitty cards together, and the fans are going to stay away from those cards, but there's always going to be the good ones that people are going to want to see. I think it's just like any other thing, you know. They have good boxing matches and they have crappy boxing matches, but they're always going to want to see the top-level guys fight. And I believe that to be true with the MMA also.
Well, I wanted to know your thoughts about some of the big matchups you've been involved with, like Justin Baseman, Scott Smith, Carter Williams, Rashad Evans, Doug Marshall. These are big-name guys that you've competed against. Which one of those guys or any other guys that you've gone against are you most surprised by maybe the way their career went, you know, since the time you faced them inside the cage?
Probably, you know, Doug Marshall, you know. I don't know. I didn't like the outcome of that fight, you know, and how the judges scored it, but they gave him the win, and that's fine. He won that fight. And I see that he's doing really well at Bellator. He knocked a lot of guys out. He's doing really good. It looks like he's gotten a lot better since then, and, you know, all the props out to him.
Well, I wanted to know your thoughts about some of the jits you've seen inside the cage recently. Some of the big guys, Korean Zombie pulls out a twister, you know. It seems like a lot of athletes are using more interesting techniques as far as jiu-jitsu is concerned. You being a guy that teaches it, some of your bread and butter, what do you think about where it is in the sport? Do you think it's overutilized, underutilized? Do you think there's more techniques that people can be using?
I think that some of those, you know, really flamboyant techniques that them guys are using to submit other people, it's on guys that really aren't that great at jiu-jitsu, you know, and then they can pull those kind of moves off, which is great, you know. It looks awesome when it's done, you know, but it's a lot harder to do something like that when you get two skilled guys at jiu-jitsu. It's going to be really a lot harder to submit them, and it's going to, you know, nullify both their attacks a lot more. So it's a lot more better when you get a guy that's really high level jiu-jitsu and he's going against somebody that doesn't know anything at all. He's going to be able to pull out his whole bag of tricks and use it on that guy, you know?
Well, I was interested in your thoughts on some of the bigger name champions out there, and most of them are really high-class strikers. You know, Anderson Silva, former champion, high-class striker. John Jones, high-class striker. Jose Aldo, high-class striker. They also have shown a really good base as far as wrestling is concerned. How do you think that someone will go about beating these guys? Is it by beating them at their own game, or would you say it's by beating them on the ground?
I don't know. I see John Jones, and he looks really good on the ground. It's about the wrestlers, especially the wrestlers that have really good submission defense. That they're hard to submit and they're hard to do anything with because their base is so strong and then their cardio is so good. They just keep coming and going and going. You know, it's going to be hard to beat somebody like that. You know.
Well, for the fans that are interested in learning more jits techniques. I see you put out videos all the time. You said you had a YouTube account. I checked some of them out. They're really actually helpful if you're ever rolling around with your friends. You can feel really smart, you know, say that Jamie taught you something that you saw on YouTube. But is your thought process about putting those out, you know, for your classes, or are they for just anyone to check them out? I mean, what are your thoughts on people getting that knowledge?
I just put it out there to people surfing the YouTube, and they look and they can reference something, and it's also for my students, when they want to come back and revisit a technique that I taught, they can use that to do also. But it also helps us, get my name out there and get other people looking at what I'm doing, and get them interested in maybe, coming into the gym and learning,
Well, a lot of people in the area obviously have a wealth of respect for what you've done inside the cage. Where are you feeling at in your career now? What's on your horizon? What are you looking forward to doing? What's driving you at this moment? Being back at GC, you just picked up a title with them. You've been with those guys for a while, have a great record with them. Where do you want to go right now? What are you hoping to do?
Right now, I just, I'm trying to build my school up and, build my student base up. And because that's, when I retire, that's what I'm going to be doing. I'm going to be teaching. But, I still got a few more fights in me, and I'd love to, get a couple bigger paydays,
Money talks. Well, I wanted to also ask you how, for guys that come across injuries, it's really easy for them to give up or slack off. You've obviously dealt with a wealth of injuries in your career and come back to be victorious and put on big streaks. What do you say that you do well as far as overcoming injuries, and what's some advice you might give to people that are still young in the sport dealing with those things?
Yeah, I stay injured. I think I get rid of the injury and I pick up two more. It's mind over matter, man. You just gotta block it out and just keep driving. I stay hurt all the time, it's crazy, but you just, I gotta do it, That's my job, and that's what I get paid to do. So I can't stop doing it. I have to.
Well, inside the cage, what would be one of your moments in which you felt like it was the most you were able to take from a fight and learn? Not just, a memorable moment for you, maybe not your best win, but what's one fight or maybe a couple fights or maybe a battle that you actually took the most from and it felt like you grew the most from?
Every time I lose a fight, I learn a lot from it, every time. I learn something different from every loss. I've learned something, and I can't say that I've learned, more from one than the other, but I always take something back from my losses, and I look back and I try to correct those mistakes so I don't make those same mistakes again.
Well, I also wanted to ask you, in GC, are there any particular matchups being a super fight champ that you're hoping to get? Do you think that there are any draws or names out there that might bring you the paydays you're looking for or the big names that you're looking for?
Probably not in GC, but maybe on one of the bigger shows. There's more money out there to be got, and hopefully I can string a few more wins together and go back and fight on one of those bigger shows and get paid a little bit more money.
Well, we're talking to Jaime Jara on the Verbal Scrap Podcast. Just a few more quick things for you. Obviously, MMA being as young as it is, it doesn't have the generational feel to it, but I feel like we've gotten to some point where there is kind of, there was an old school MMA and kind of a new school MMA. How do you feel like some of the newer athletes that are so young in the sport, how do you feel they're dealing with taking MMA forward? Do you feel like, they're doing it correctly? Do you feel like there's maybe a newer attitude that they should also adhere to from older, more experienced veterans?
I think it's a lot different than it was back then. I mean, when I started, I was fighting in 8-man tournaments. I was fighting 3 times in one night. It's a lot different. But I think that nowadays, everybody's having to train harder and they're having to put more work in because everybody's getting better faster. And if you're not training, you're not going to win fights.
Well, one of the last things I wanted to ask you, coming from every fight you've gone through and experiencing all the new growth you've gone through after every win, every loss, what's maybe one or some of the things that you had a perception of coming into the sport that you've maybe grown or thought differently about now?
Probably the training. Before when I would train 3 or 4 days a week, and I thought that was enough, But nowadays, like I said, if you're not training every day and you're not doing everything right every minute, that's the thing about fighting. It's not a job that you go to and then when you're done training, you come home and it's done. No, it's 24 hours a day. You have to train. You have to eat right. You have to go to bed at a certain time. You have to be, your mind has to be right for that whole training cycle. It's a 24-hour thing, and it's a mindset. And if you don't have the right mindset, then you shouldn't be fighting.
Well, I wanted to give you an opportunity, like we give everybody else, to give thanks, shout outs, maybe any last issues or thoughts on your mind you'd like to give. This is an opportunity for you. Go ahead.
I just want to shout out to my team Carnage and my coach Mike Rumsey and everybody over at Casio Werdix Jiu-Jitsu for helping me push for all the fights that I do, and all my teammates and all my training partners. I just want to say thanks.
Well, check out the YouTube account to get more inside details on the Jits game. Like I said, you can wire your friends if you're somewhat low on the totem pole like me, or you can go and take them to classes, which you can also take at Carnage MMA. So check out the website, get more information, and also check out SRMMA.com for more details. It was a pleasure to have you in studio. I wish you the best, and thank you for your time.
Hey, Al,
Thanks, guys.
you ready? Let's do it.